feel I always needed to find a form that would allow me to write in a polyphonic register. I'm a handler of voices. I'm a conductor of voices. I perhaps have a style. I don't believe I have a voice. I don't believe the author's voice is inherent in me, particularly not on a kind of pedestal in relation to other voices. I'm quite hungry for dialect, for slang, for a kind of democratic, busy, peopled surface. Like Ariel in The Tempest. The island is full of voices, and I want to continually help. I want to continue improve my ability to listen to the world through the books I write, and hopefully that's a collaborative undertaking with my reader, who I want to encourage to listen to the text in different ways, and to achieve often some kind of musicality that is within but is also theirs to create. There's a sort of dynamic syncopation between the text and the reader that I hope I can't control, but I can set up the conditions. And that needs more than one register, that needs more than one voice. But also I'm a playful writer, I think. I like to move between different registers. I like, in the same way as I might move from a kind of essayistic style into something approaching fairy tale, something approaching list and found objects. I'm a collagist in that regard. And I think that the language of children has always really appealed to me, the sort of satirical way in which you can employ the kind of highfalutin style of social realist prose, anything like that. I want to continue to be playful in the way I juxtapose these elements. But I'm like a kid. I want books. I want the novel to be like a radio drama. I want the novel to be like a screenplay. I want the novel to be like being told a ghost story by someone alone in a dark room. I think you can achieve these conditions if you play fast and loose with the rules. I sort of begin with music. I listen to music all day. When I was on Spotify, which one tries not to use these corrupted digital streaming platforms. But they send you the summary. I listen to, there's a banjo player I listened to 145,000 hours of in 1 year. I listen to music from the minute I wake up to the minute I go to bed. And I can write listening to music. Many writers can't. I love it because I can achieve greater rhythmical complexity or emotional complexity if I'm working against something or with something or borrowing something. I have endless playlists, music to write with, music to think with, music to walk with. But music, there is, I think, in the prose, there is a musicality, there is an inherent interest in rhythm and pace, and I hope I hope in the way that I sound things out, not even just in terms of the sentences, but the ideas as well. I hope that there is some rhythmic or percussive element to my thinking as well as to the language itself. But also I have written about music, and as I have written about art. And for me, this is to try and solve an age-old and inescapable problem within me about music, visual art, and writing. I want what each has. When I'm doing one, I want the other. I miss the other. When I'm making a piece of art, I need language. And when I'm using language, I need images. Or I need the techniques of photography or collage or sketching or draftsmanship or paint. And all of those things are music. Music is as close as you get to God, so I'm trying always to listen. Where is the music in a sentence? Where is the musicality in a certain phrase? What should I discard because there is no music in it? This isn't to say my work is all lilting and tuneful. Quite the opposite sometimes. What is a prose style that would approximate the sound of bleeding edge drone music? Can it be done? Can I have a text shy bubbles along and is structured like a piece of digitally programmed music? Where is the bass line? Where is the snare? If I write at 170 beats per minute because this child is obsessed with drum and bass, does that mean I need to write about drum and bass? Probably not. I can have drum and bass in the sound, in the use of the language, and that I hope I stretch and push at the limits of the language as well. I'm a shamefully monolinguist. that brings shame to the English person in the world. Is why I pay such attention to my translators. So grateful to my translators and so interested to hear what they have to say, because I want, even in the English language I'm writing in, I hope I'm spilling over. You know, it's borderless. I hope that, you know, as I spill into technical language or nonsense language, that's because I want the language to be squirming. I want the language to be ricocheting between old and new and unheard, and that is fundamentally a sonic undertaking. That's music. When I say I'm trying to solve a fundamental problem, I mean that in the best possible way. Like when I say I worry about language or the socio-economic context of production, or this is a positive thing. Worrying as itching, or as not letting a thing settle, not letting a linguistic formulation settle into a pre-existing template, not letting a political idea settle into the discourse around the very narrow moral or political discourse that we live in, which is so unambitious. Not letting myself stop worrying about my gestures towards my children, or the language of others, or what am I imbibing? This is how I write. Is it to sort of worry the poetic or the lyric mark into something bigger, to let it unravel itself, and that's an editorial sensibility. I was trained to worry about other writers' work. Is this lazy? Is this long? Is this imitative? Is this cruel? Is this cliched? And I think I bring that to my own work. So I'm worrying as I write. And the longer I do this, I think the better I feel about that worrying, that sort of state of it's almost like a sort of, I mean, for the writer, I think it should be and can be almost a sort of erotic charge underneath your daily life, underneath the sort of beautiful banality of your everyday life, of having to sleep and having to eat and having to shit and having to work and having to fill in forms and having to sit on hold to Vodafone or whatever. Underneath all the time is this burning desire to worry that onto the page and to think about the implications of that and to mix and marry and change and as I say, it's a sort of listening. But I think now I realise that's maybe the best part. I like my books being published. I love my books being translated. But what I really like is when I'm thinking of a new thing and I have these little dips and troughs of enthusiasm and wretched, abysmal pits of despair when I realise the thing is bust, it's gone, it's done. And then this kind of weird, almost like I'm being flirted with or I'm having an affair with an idea, but it hasn't got a structural conceit, so I don't know where to put it. So until I decide, it's letters from such and such, or it's actually written from the point of view of the bird, or the siblings are one brother, or he's left the home and he's got his headphones on. Until I have my conceit, which will then lead to formal decisions, I'm lost and I'm mad. And I've realised that being mad is my favourite part of it. And I mustn't let no man seek to rush or fix the insanity that is bestowed upon me by being lucky enough to make creative decisions. And I do this with my mentees. I say to them, this is the good bit. Don't worry about getting an agent. Don't worry about being published. That will or won't happen further down the line. And that's going to be a lot of luck, and it's going to be certain economic circumstances that are rigged, frankly, or a bit fucked or beyond your control or whatever. But this bit now, when is it a short story, it is a novel, is that character too cheap? Should this thing set in South London in 1864 actually be set on the moon in 2045? Play, that kind of relentless, almost flagellating of the self through refining the idea is wonderful. Hideous, wonderful. When I talk about literature, I'm often using bodily language or sensory or even scatological language, or the language of being flayed or being kicked in the guts or being or buzzing with an idea or itching with an idea or needing to vomit a thing up. I think I've been, the artwork that really changed my life when I was younger was the performance art of people like Gina Parnay and Rebecca Wilkes and Franco B. and Paul McCarthy and Carolee Schneemann, and I just came across this work and the documentation of this work. And even Joseph Beuys and Bourgeois or Eva Hesse, and I remember thinking, Eva Hesse's work, for example, this is this is an intellectual proposition in relation to the history of the image in Western art. This is a conceptual gesture she is making towards what has come before. But it is also deeply and utterly and shockingly connected to the body and to the material of the body, to the relationship between flesh and latex or hair and wool. And I want that in my work. And I want my work to be physically affecting. I hope it is. I'm pleased when people tell me, people tell me it makes them feel sick or that it created a physical yearning or choked them with tears. These are good things. These are things that I seek. And not suggesting that literature should, of course, always have these sort of bombastic effects. But we are bodies. There is a terrible denial of the body, of our functions and of our failings. And I think if all my work, from the very beginning, from the kind of yelp of the crow, explaining to these children that this sad event isn't necessarily just sad, it might also be the key to all joy and all gratitude and all ecstatic engagement with the world, with the connection between them and their skin and feathers and the bodies of dead things in the air that we breathe, and the fact that they are drinking water that the dinosaurs drank. These sort of epiphanies that the crow and the dad give the children are epiphanies that I still turn over and still find extraordinary. I'm an animist, I am excited by the interconnectedness of all living things, and I want that excitement in the books, and in the reading experience. You've given me the gift of your time. Not much of it, because my books are so short, but you've given me, nevertheless, a few hours. You're sitting, holding a physical object in your hand. I want to address those conditions. They are rarefied conditions. They're weird. They should be universal. That's why I work so much with literacy. This should be the universal gift. When you deny someone literacy, you deny them a shocking and profound encounter with themselves and others transmitted through the abstract idea of literature. And that's one of the reasons, I suppose, there's always a sort of magic realist or there's a sort of portal in my books to a different way of thinking about the body in relation to time. There are always going to be beings in my books that come to tell humans that this is an extraordinary moment, this is an extraordinary possibility. I suppose I am using the slippage or the state between sense or non-sense, or between established language and pure noise or anything. I suppose I'm using or calling attention to these states, using either formal techniques or breaks or actually probably a kind of interdisciplinary approach or hybridity, literal hybridity. You would go from a list to a chunk of prose, to something approaching a lyric, to something approaching, a piece of concrete poetry scattered on the page or something. And these are collaborative undertakings designed, I hope, quite carefully designed to raise awareness of certain points I'm trying to make about who is listening and who is being listened to and who has power, and why it is that certain artificial conditions of literature shouldn't be accepted. I shouldn't be a person of institutional or intellectual privilege giving you literature and that not be examined. I want that to be examined simultaneously in what I'm writing about, but also in how I'm doing it. I want that relationship between text and reader to be an animated dialogue, an experience, an experiential exchange between us. And it sounds sort of cliched, or it certainly sounds sort of affected to think of a book as a collaboration between itself and the reader. But I think the crucial formulation there is that it's not between me and the reader. It's between the book and the reader. And therefore, every single encounter is unique and way far beyond my control. And I like that. I like that about, particularly it's the implications for translation. I like the infinite nuances that exist in our own minds as we encounter literature. And I suppose what you can do is hope I used to talk a lot as a teenager about, it's borrowed from a Michael Franti song, the loneliness of being misunderstood. And over the years, you know, through bad reviews, good reviews, meeting extraordinary writers, meeting terrible writers, meeting kind people, hurt people, what I've come to realize is that being misunderstood is in fact an exhilaration. That's where the possibility lies. Because for me to control it would be for me to think that literature is part of, or even an apparatus of control and an ideologically fixed point that is the center, which would be power, which would be something we need to disassemble rather than prop up. I'm not a controlling writer, and it was a nice thing to discover about myself early on, really. Did I seek to correct misunderstandings about my work? No, I kind of liked them. They nag at me in the same way as ideas do, that's fine. Did I want to police other people's adaptations of my work and be in the room all the time so that they don't get it wrong? No, absolutely not. I want to be in the room because I'm fascinated by their difference of opinion on the work, by hearing my work read back to me in another voice. You know, if anything, I've just been like profoundly, almost drunkenly gobbling up this difference. I love how different my work sounds on the radio. I like how an actor with a different accent reads a monologue I've written back to me, and I can hear a completely different musicality in the language than the one I intended. I like seeing the different capabilities of the theatre. My work, particularly the first book, seems to work on stage in a way that I wonder, was that deliberate? Was I staging a little play in my mind? Had I built a little flat? And did I move Crow into different rooms? Did I put the boys around as if I were directing a play? I think possibly I was. So I really like it. As I do more, I mean, I wrote a screenplay last year, and I sort of found myself, I wrote it quite quickly, and I found myself being quite self-conscious about the difference between my writing because I'm not someone that sits in an office and writes between 9 and 12 and then has a cup of coffee. I'm writing whenever I can. I'm writing on bits of paper. I'm taking the kids to school, then running back. Now I'm going to walk the dogs, so I take the dog out, and then I write something on my phone, then I rush back, and then by the time I've answered the emails, I think, oh Christ, time to pick up the kids. So when I do my writing, I'm not quite sure. But when I was writing the screenplay, I was extremely self-conscious. I was thinking, it's like dry stone walling. I'm putting a chunk there, which will relate to that chunk. So I better write that chunk, move it in, drop it. You know, I'm a complete Luddite as well, so I'm literally doing this, cutting and pasting a bit of thing, putting it in a different program, taking it across. You know, it's quite laborious, and the labour felt good. The labour felt necessary, and it felt necessary to be self-aware of the difference between these forms. And now when I go back to write fiction, I feel, of course, a sort of wind beneath my wings, because I don't have to think what a costume department or a producer or a budget implications of this work. I'm completely free again. And I'm very grateful that my movement between these forms is allowing me to fall in love again with the first one, the main one, which is this odd structure I seem to find, this odd dance between poetry and prose that feels like my safest, happiest, weirdest, riskiest place. When I see an adaptation of my work, I simultaneously become a listener again. I also feel an extraordinary ambient disconnect. Who wrote this? This is sometimes you're like, it's quite good, writing's quite good, and then you go, oh, they're sort of drenched in shame because what you're realizing is your writing is quite good. And the exact opposite. You're thinking, I can do better than this, I can improve this. What I like is that you're seeing a bodily manifestation, and you're seeing a translation occur between something that was pinned to the page that is now up and walking, talking. And what I find is that that has much more to do with a sort of directorial sensibility within me in relation to bodies or almost movement dance in the space than it has to do with ideas. It's actually pre-linguistic. So one of the most moving evenings of my life was seeing an adaptation of Grief is a Thing with Feathers in Amsterdam, which was taken from the book. They used the text of the book. And obviously I wrote the book, so I know what they're saying, but I don't speak a word of Dutch. And so I watched these two, they very cleverly cast the boys as grown-ups. And so the boys, these men, young men, take it in turns really to sort of convey to the dad what Crow was. So they all become Crow. Dad's Crow is very different to the boy's Crow, and Crow becomes a kind of contested entity. because I don't speak Dutch and because I don't need to understand, I just watched it as bodies using odd sounds coming from their mouths to convey to one another the extreme pain and the extraordinary joy that was within that pain as it unraveled, as it occurred and unflourished and unfurled in them over time. And I felt like a Martian. I felt like I'd come to this planet and was just utterly, instantly, head over heels in love with these peculiar, upright people that used, that croaked and squealed and wept and sometimes yelled and sometimes went very, very quiet. It was just a staggeringly beautiful proposition. I thought, right, now I need to write a book with no words. Now I need to write a book that is only stage directions. And then I think, God, I think maybe I need to write an opera. Maybe I am writing operas already. Maybe these are novels that are like operas. Maybe I need to write a play in which nobody speaks. It's all just one stage direction. And I think, no, why would I need to make that a play? I can do that in my novels. So I'm constantly falling in love. And I don't think one should, I think it's joyful, lucky, wonderful thing to be adapted. But I hope that I was doing it anyway. I hope that that's what I was doing in the first book, alone in my little flat in London when I was really tired and my wife was watching box sets and the children were finally asleep. I think that's what I was doing. I was rocketing between TV show, opera, rap, sketch, joke, essay, love letter, memorial, psalm. I think that I have always just been a little bird-like, sniffing around the different forms. So I need to try and keep that. I need to stay there.